Welcome back to Cosmic Disclosure. I'm your host, David Wilcock, and I'm here with our guest, Emery Smith, with deeper insights into his extraterrestrial co-workers. Emery, welcome back.
Thanks, Dave.
This is one of the most fascinating topics of your testimony as far as I'm concerned, because it's one thing to have a specimen that's dead. And as you said before, you didn't know whether these were really extraterrestrials or not, right?
No, I had no clue.
What could be an example of something where you knew that it was an extraterrestrial? Were there any cases where it was certain that it was not a genetically modified being?
Yes, I mean, after a few years in the projects and your clearance gets up and you're getting briefed on different scenarios and different types of extraterrestrials where they're saying they're extraterrestrials or beings from other than Earth origin, and also getting access to the most amazing libraries of encyclopedias that they have there. It's all on computer mainframes. You get to really understand that we're just a small part of such a wide and vast array of other beings that are spread out through the universe and multiverse.
So if we could take off in a ship and start going to other star systems, how common would it be to find planets with inhabited intelligent life on them? Is it seldom the case? Is it sort of half and half? Is it mostly the case, or is it almost always the case that a given solar system will have some intelligent beings living in it?
The best way I could put that is, if I were to ask you, if you jumped into the ocean, how many different species would you find amongst just jumping into one ocean? So it's that vast, and there's that many beings. There's an unimaginable amount of beings of different races.
So you could then say that pretty much any star system we would go to, unless there was really horrible conditions or something, is going to have beings that have set up shop there and have civilizations.
Exactly. This is what people don't understand, because beings don't need a planet to survive on. They have already mastered to make their own planets and their own space stations to live on. And there's some beings that never touch a planet, but they travel around, of course. Because their own craft or ships that are hundreds of miles in diameter can actually reproduce living conditions such as a planet, such as an ocean, such as an island, such as growing food.
When we were talking about your extraterrestrial co-workers before, you had mentioned this probably more benevolent reptilian race. You'd mentioned they were in a constellation called Boots. Could we discuss a little more about that? Like, if we went to their star system, what would we see?
Well, you would see a lot of traffic, number one, in this area, because there's just a lot of races that live in this sector of space. But the one I was talking about has a type of Death Star look to it. It's man-made, and they have craft on these space stations that look like meteorites, and they can be up to 30 miles long, some of these.
Wow.
And they can be also as small as a compact 24-foot U-Haul truck. They have a lot of families there. They raise their children on these things. They get educated there. They graduate just in a few years of life and have a higher IQ than we do, just in 2 or 3 years, these children. they also have a faster healing rate than we do. And we're trying to study that healing rate from the reptilians. Maybe you've seen some of the pictures on my website of me taking the blood from alligators. This was a direct correlation of what we were doing to test why can an alligator in the Everglades sustain a huge wound of another alligator ripping its leg off, and in just a matter of weeks, not only did it coagulate just fine, but it also had no infection and sometimes grows back. So some of the projects I worked on was actually doing this, is trying to replicate the healing factors of the genetic DNA of these reptilians.
I find it very interesting when we look at Indian history in the Mahabharata and the Vedas, that we have what appears to be an evil reptilian race called Rakshasas, but that there also was a benevolent reptilian race called Nagas that they actually ended up making temples out of. And
Right.
you actually see lots and lots of stone inscriptions of what looks like humans, but then they have like a reptilian tail, like a snake.
Yes.
So do you think that these benevolent reptilian ETs that you were talking about could have been there at the time of the Indian civilization where those texts were written?
Yeah, I 100% believe that. I know all the texts you're talking about. I know the statues that you're talking about. I know the amulets they made of them and some of the carvings down there. So that I agree that these reptilians that I'm associated with, that I know, are this a little bit more docile hybrid type, human type figures, and they were looked up as gods.
Now, it's also interesting because Pete Peterson did say that there was a benevolent reptilian race as well. And he had told me that they were very keenly interested in our religious development, our spiritual development, that they were very wise, very advanced, and they really seemed to want us to become ethical and to learn how to all get along with each other.
Yeah, I can concur with that. They do have a religious background that I don't know everything about, but they're very strong about it. And they do carry amulets and jewelry that show their belief in this system. They also have sometimes special clothing for certain like holiday type things that they may wear, such as a scarf or a ribbon on their arm. And these things celebrate this religion that you speak of, which is the unity of all and one that they believe in. And they believe, even though they're of different genetic DNA, they also believe that everyone has their DNA. And they believe in the system, solar system and universe that actually seeded it, and over billions of years, other formations of their genetic lineage is mixed around, and actually where we come from. And that's why you see sometimes in the medical society of people saying, well, we have the reptile part of the brain and this because we're associated with an iguana or something. So it's very funny that this is all, coming out and the questions that you asked, because I do have I believe there's a correlation with this race, and we might have a little bit of that DNA in us to some extent.
I'm just curious if you ever heard about this benevolent reptilian race talking about the Draco and the very antagonistic other types of reptilians that apparently just about everybody was opposing, because the Draco seemed to be this group that's trying to invade and conquer just about every other civilization they can find.
I've never heard them speak about that. I've never seen any data to support that from their lineage. They do have their own belief of where they came from as far as, the very first reptilians, which I do believe probably could have come from the more, Draco style, evil type, reptilians that people talk about. But I can't, really say honestly, I'm just speculating on that.
Well, this is a very interesting point because Pete Peterson did say that there was a reptilian diaspora. A diaspora is when essentially one group that is a spiritually inclined group breaks off from another group because they believe that group has become evil. Pete said that these benevolent reptilians he spoke about had a diaspora from a negative reptilian group in the past. Very interestingly.
Very interesting.
And perhaps the fact that they might have been hybridized with humans means that maybe they would have more compassion for us.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I believe that lineage carries over through DNA.
Yeah, very interesting.
Very.
Let's go back now to some of the other extraterrestrials that you've had as coworkers, since that's our main topic on this episode. Could you give me an example of one race that we haven't spoken about yet that you could share with us now?
Yeah, I can go over a couple of races. I think maybe I should talk about the more liquid state planets, that are associated with ETs that, everyone thinks ETs are all just of the 3D in this Earth air atmosphere, and that's not the case. You have beings that have to live in water or come from a water planet. You have these types of beings that come from the Pleiades system, and we call them Aquaphariens, some of the first of these extraterrestrials that live in water. They don't need to, but their planet is 98% water. And they actually work in water. That's where they feel comfortable.
And you said they came from Sirius?
No, Pleiades, the Pleiades system, yes. The Aquapharian type extraterrestrials, they call them through my experience.
Well, this is very interesting because there is a correlation with a book by Robert Temple called The Sirius Mystery, in which he studied this particular African tribe that comes from Mali, and they have this Aquapharian race, I'll use your term, that approached them called the Nomo. And they gained very precise information about the fact that Sirius had a little companion star called Sirius B. They had information about the planets that were around it, all this very specific stuff. And their legends clearly describe these as aquatic humanoid beings. So this is a really interesting new line of inquiry then.
I mean, I have to comment, a lot of our operating rooms and centers, in the bases are definitely, completely filled with salt water or fresh water.
Really?
Just for this type of thing. And
so you would actually do an autopsy in a self-contained
yes,
suit inside water?
Yes, underwater and heavily weighted down or with magnets that keep us on the ground.
Wow.
and we have all the, sustainable air, through the same hoses that I use above ground.
Sounds like it would be exhausting if you're fighting against.
It is. It's very taxing on the body for some reason. And I don't know if it's just because of, being underwater. It's just even mentally taxing, the energy or something of the water. It's kind of like scuba diving, where you can get tired pretty quick. And you do seem to use a lot more oxygen underwater for some reason when we are doing these giant autopsies, and also, looking at the craft. Some craft have to be in a special salt-soluble water for them to stay intact. Once they are turned off, they cannot hold their shape.
Would that imply that they could only portal from one ocean to another and they wouldn't fly through space?
They can fly through space because they have their own gravitational field around them that encompasses the water.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's bizarre. So let's talk about these Pleiadian Aquapharians that you saw. I'd like to start with a visual description of what they look like.
Well, there's many types of water-type extraterrestrials. There's some that look like manatees. There's some that look like dolphins. And there's even some that do have a shape from the waist down that's kind of scaly and has fins on the outer edges of these beings. But from, the chest up, they actually look pretty human.
Now, just to be clear, these are extraterrestrial live co-workers that you're seeing on these bases, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think this is maybe where the mermaids come from. I think this mythological, background of the history of these sailors seeing these beings could possibly have had a base here on the planet. And there's a lot of cities that, people are discovering, but the cabal does not let people know this, that are underground. And it wasn't because they were flooded, it's because that's where they really were, these cities, under the ocean, under the ocean. And that also proves the fact that these extraterrestrials lived here and they flourished here at some point in time. And I know you know a lot about the history of the mermaids and some of the extraterrestrials over in Asia.
Sure.
That have, I think they're called, what's the name?
Kappa in
Right,
Japan.
exactly.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. It's a very interesting thing.
Yeah,
which
please.
was research I learned in part from having had a Japanese girlfriend in college. And I was already very interested in extraterrestrials by the time I was a senior and we had this relationship. So I found out firsthand that they had considered it an absolute fact that you could not have your kids walk near bodies of water.
Oh, right.
And they still, to this day, have warning signs near the water warning about the kappa, which is, the legends say, it's a reptilian aquatic being, okay? And it comes out of the water and grabs kids and drags them into the water. So these beings could speak their native Japanese language. They would make jokes. They were often very inappropriate and rude. They would make rude noises, rude gestures, and they were very kind of sarcastic and arrogant.
Wow. Interesting.
So, what do you think these kappa could be actual extraterrestrials that got here somehow?
I do believe there's some sort of correlation with a lot of the stories over there of this, these descendants from, the Aquapharians, I think, are multiple as far as genetics and DNA. Just like we have a lot of different types of humans here, and over millions and millions of years, we have spread across the universe. The same thing has happened with the Aquapharian people, and they do come in these different forms, like I talked about.
So, in your project that had a cup in the top of their head like the kappa.
No, I actually didn't.
Okay.
I've not seen that at all, but they somehow are able to breathe air and also breathe the oxygen in the water. And some do have gills like you would see in the movies on their backs and necks.
Okay.
And they're multiphasic where they can, walk out of water and breathe the air through their mouth. And we've operated on some of these, and they have air bladders and they have different types of lungs. Very interesting to see, 4 sets of lungs in a being that can, filter it just like you would see in the sharks and the gills of many modern day fish that we have here on the planet.
Now, you had said that some of these beings actually have a head that's like a dolphin.
Yes, just to really be more specific, if you can see a dolphin with 2 arms and 2 legs and standing upright and very, very cylindrical body, which stands out, not that big fin on the back though, and they do have these little webbed type feet, but they have arms, and the arms have 2 different phalanges, 2 fingers on there. And the face does not have a snout like a bottlenose dolphin or anything like that, but they have a very large mouth. And it does come out just a little bit of a snout, but not like you would see in our modern day dolphins and porpoises. But the mouth goes all the way to the sides
wow.
of
That would
the
be
thing. Yeah.
a little disturbing to see, perhaps.
Yeah, it's it's a little, but they don't ever open that mouth. You never see that mouth, and they have lips like a grouper fish,
Yeah.
and they're kind of funny looking, actually. No offense, guys, but they do look a kind of comical looking, like you'd see on a cartoon character, and they only communicate through telepathic waves and through frequency. And you can hear those sounds, the same sounds you hear with the whales that you probably hear in your meditation CDs.
Now, with the dolphin, the eyes are kind of way on the sides of the head.
Yes.
So, how do the eyes place on these
Yeah,
faces?
so imagine a very round, bulbous head like a light bulb. And those eyes are on the side of the head, but they do have great vision is still more forward than you see in our society of dolphins and whales, where they're completely like a hammerhead way out here. Okay. So they are forward looking eyes.
Do they have any ears?
Just the slits, the holes, yeah, but no ear lobes or anything like that. They have very small fins on their back, not like the big fins you would see on a dolphin or a shark today. Maybe only 3 to 4 inches of these little fins that go down their back, maybe 5 or 6 of them in the middle of the back only.
Now, you mentioned that their whole body is like a big cylinder.
It is very
do they have just stubby
cylindrical.
little legs at
They
the
do.
bottom?
They have very stubby legs with these big fat feet, and they do have flanges on. I mean, they have like toes on their feet, and they're webbed, and they have this webbing on the sides of their body like the other aquapharians, which I think is an aquapharian trait to have this very thin all the way down their arms and their body. And sometimes you actually see it on the heads of different ones, like the manatee ones. And there is something there like that cuttlefish fin that goes all the way down to their feet.
Now, as far as the arms go, obviously a typical dolphin just has flippers, but yet when we actually look at the skeleton inside the flipper, it actually looks like a hand.
It is, and they do have a humerus, and they have the same bones we do. And instead of you guys seeing like a skeleton of a whale where you guys see just that, they are hands. I mean, you could see this. Even whales, if you look at their stuff, even their back, they have little leg bones inside their body that somehow over millions of years have like receded into that. But these are full arms, skeletal arms and legs, just like we have.
So if the legs are stubby, what are the arms like? Do they have more length on their arms?
Yes, they have more length than the legs. Absolutely. Yeah, they're
Interesting.
not the fastest runners on the planet.
But again, it kind of sounds to me as if there's this humanizing intelligence that takes different types of life and will make it so that it has opposable thumbs and hands and
Yes. Yeah, there's
and
a
the
conscious.
things.
I believe there's a conscious energy in the universe that over time it affects other planets around the whole universe and maybe multiverse, where it's the same 5-star program.
Yeah,
I think it's some sort of program.
right. So do you have any information about where these dolphin beings came from? Did you ever work with them directly, one-on-one?
I've only indirectly worked with them. That means I've only seen them, and I've never been able to communicate with them because it's a very a special language, and you have to have a special device that interprets the frequencies of their chirps.
Oh,
that
really?
they're chirping, and it's kind of like a Morse code, but very, very fast. You could have a few dozen chirps in a second, but you couldn't. We don't have the brain or the hearing capabilities to catch it. It's so fast, but it's a whole conversation that we would take maybe in one of these episodes 30 minutes could be done in 5 minutes for them.
Wow.
So
So do they feel like it's really slow to talk to us? Is it boring for them?
Yes. And they have a 3 times size of our brain.
Wow.
And they're very conscious. And I feel bad for the dolphins and whales here because we should treat them like we treat these ETs. Just because we can't communicate with them doesn't mean they're not conscious or they're stupid. Maybe we are ignorant.
So you have no information about where they
Oh,
originated?
from Pleiades and Sirius section.
Oh, okay.
The Aquapharians started in the Pleiades and then migrated, I know, to Sirius sections. I don't know where in there, but I'm only telling you what I've read from the history of being in that library. And I was fascinated, of course, with dolphins and whales. I have a really good connection with them. I've done a lot of underwater photography and have a great bond with these fish and the mammals.
Could we now get into the manatee being that you
Yes.
mentioned a little more? Tell us more exactly what it looks like visually. Let's start with the face. We know what a manatee's face looks like.
Yeah, it looks
kind of
like,
like a walrus, but without the tusks.
yeah, it does kind of look like that. I used to make jokes by my dear departed Beowulf, my dog, that recently passed. He has this face. He's a French Mastiff, you know, his dog day Bordeaux. But it's very human. It's more stout instead of having the big, like a manatee has this big blubber snout, you know, with all the whiskers.
Yeah.
It's more contracted, and the eyes are pitch black, and they're very close together on these beings. And they're very obese looking. And they have just little hands that they really don't use, kind of like a T-Rex,
Wow.
you know. And it's really funny, and they're really comical. And
Well, when you say they look obese, would they have the rolls like we would see with
yes,
a very
they
overweight
have
person?
rolls.
Okay.
They have rolls, and they're very strong beings. And they also have these short, stubby legs, you know, maybe 24 inches, you know, up to where the knees go into the body starts. But they're very tall, very large. They actually dwarfed over me at least by 2 feet, and they had this personality of a very old scientist, and they know everything. And they have this thing about their main thing is history, about how they came to be the enlightened Aquapharians. They compete with the dolphins, and you know, it's a very funny thing, just kind of like my dog does. You know, he knows everything. And I get this real humble feeling, but they can talk. They have vocal cords. They don't chirp. They don't have that other vocal as the dolphins and other aquapharians. They actually can speak, and they speak in very deep tones and deep voices, unlike any human you have ever heard. I wish I could replicate it, but I can't.
So just some basics here, like what would their color be? What would the color of their skin be?
It's just like you see the manatees here on the planet. They have a dullish gray, but it's not like weather beaten like you see our manatees. And I've worked on many manatees. I've done stem cells on manatees for down in Florida that got run over by boats with the propellers. And they have a very more smoother texture skin that has a sheen to it. And it's a bluish gray. And they do have whiskers on the sides of their face, kind of like a very small mustache.
You said that there's little hands poking out from the top of their bodies. Do they
Yes.
have fingers and thumbs like
Yes,
us?
they have 4 fingers and a very small thumb that you can barely see, just a nub. And you can use them. You know, they actually, you know, I've never seen them hold anything though. I've never seen them grabbing or holding, but they're really agile. They can move around. They're very fat, you know, large, and they communicate very well. And you could hear a deep voice around the corner, and you know it's one of these aquapharians from this system.
And do you know where they're from?
They're also from the Pleiades system.
Okay.
Yes.
Do they wear any clothing?
Yes. They have suits that they wear that are formed over them through a special device that, don't forget, they can be in the water or out of the water,
Okay.
They can hold their breath a very long time, but they don't breathe the water like the other ones do, so everyone knows. But they can definitely work underwater for over an hour. I remember a few of them watching in one of the aquariums, operating rooms, that they were treating one of their own for something. I don't remember exactly what the story was behind that, but I just remember admiring them, working on these beings underwater with their little fingers. It was really cute, and I just I wasn't able to ever interact, face to face like you and I. I was just indirectly part of a program where I was watching them, and people were teaching me about them.
Okay, last question, then we're out of time here. You've mentioned getting a kind of telepathic spiritual ecstasy hit from some of these extraterrestrials. Now, these, you said, speak verbally, not telepathically. Do you still feel some sort of spiritual bliss by being around the manatee beings?
Yeah, there's something about them. They can resonate an actual sound from them that humans cannot hear, but they can feel it. And it's a really beautiful sensation. It reminds me of when I hear a good song, and I'm starting starting to feel it. And that's what I feel when they're around. It's this low tone thump inside you, and you can feel this from a very far distance from them. I mean, they were at least 30, maybe 40 feet from me, and I was outside of the tank, and they're sitting there doing this energy. It's this energy. They're not dancing, but it makes you feel like music. It's like harmonic of some sort. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Well, that's all the time we have in this episode. It's very, very fascinating, and I do hope we get to meet these beings soon. Do you think that will happen?
Oh, I know it's going to happen.
Wow, that would be amazing. Well, I want to thank you for watching. This is Cosmic Disclosure with our special guest, Emery Smith.
Coming soon on Cosmic Disclosure.
IDARF, the Interplanetary Defense